Hello, this is Bill with a few more video tutorials on perspective. This one is using diagonals in perspective and use diagonals to uh, estimate or delineate uniform distances in perspective. So let's get started. My first example is just a simple telephone pole. Horizon line, vanishing point. I just arbitrarily put a telephone pole in here. Since this is the eye level, this kind of shows how far below or where my head is in relationship to the entire telephone pole. So here would be a person about 5.5 feet. Okay, so that's basically how you'd see the telephone pole. So the first step is just to arbitrarily pick out one distance for the first telephone pole. And I'm going to pick right about here. I'm looking at, this is a 6-foot person, and maybe about the telephone poles are what, 30 feet apart, whatever. I'm just going to estimate this distance, this first distance right here. Now, this could be a telephone pole, it could be any flagpole, it could be anything that's going off into perspective. So there's my first telephone pole. Okay. Draw the two diagonals from the bottom of this pole up to the top of the second one, and the same on the other side. That establishes the middle between the top and the bottom in perspective. Connect this point where the diagonals intersect with the vanishing point. I'm doing this freehand just to make it quicker. If you need to use a ruler to do this, go ahead and do that. So I've connected the intersection of the diagonals with the vanishing point. Now we're going to I'm going to use another color pencil just so you can see the difference with this and won't get too confusing. So the rule is that you can see where this diagonal goes through the bottom of the pole and through the intersection of the diagonals and on that center line right there. So if I mimic that right through here, bottom of the pole through that center line, okay, this gives me a point right here. Went from the bottom of that first pole through the intersection of the center line with the second pole. I went through this point right here. That gives me this point right here, which I could drop down. So I'm going up to here, drop down. There's the next pole. And you can see immediately that because it's going off in the distance, that distance becomes a little smaller. Just repeat that. The bottom of the previous pole through the center line where it intersects that pole, that second pole. A little bit darker. There's the next pole. Now, what's going to make this look realistic or believable or not is, let me stop right here. These two are probably too close together for telephone poles. If this is a person right here, this is probably a little too close. I maybe should have started here. I just wanted to do it close enough so I have enough of these to demonstrate. Just keep repeating. I'm going from the previous pole through that center line where the center line intersects the next pole. And that gives you the point on that projection for the top of the poles and then down. You can see how they're getting closer together. Okay. And you just keep going. Okay. Next one, I'm going to probably do a couple of these videos on the diagonal because I'm only allowed 12 minutes on YouTube, and then it doesn't, it won't let me upload it. Let me put this in. So here's the side of the building. Again, 1-point perspective. And I projected the top and the bottom of the building out to the vanishing point. Now, see, wherever you put your eye level will determine where you are. If you put your eye level up here, that would mean you're looking at this building probably from another building 4 or 5 stories up, or from a helicopter. but this I've kind of just done where a person would be standing. Okay, so let's just say we're going to divide this up the whole point with diagonals, you're dividing it up into uniform segments. So maybe I'm going to do 4 or 5 buildings that are all the same width. Or maybe this is one long building that I want to make sure I put windows at regular intervals. Anyway, this first one is just arbitrary. So say that's going to be the width of the building, and I want every building to be the same width. Whatever the application is, the same principle applies. Put in the 2 diagonals. And make these lines very light because they're not part of the building. They're just construction lines. So just light enough for you to see. I'm making them darker so they show up on the video. Here's the center of that rectangle in perspective. Connect that again with the vanishing point. There's a center line. So now it's just a matter of going, you can see where this is going on here across the diagonal, and it intersects the midpoint here. So if I move over to this one and do the same thing, from here up to this diagonal, or up to this point right here, I'm creating like a new rectangle, basically. Through that point, it gives me that new point on the projection right here and down. Same as the flagpole, but just I'm applying it to a building. Keep repeating. There's the point I'm going through. And on and on. So this gives me some ability to kind of measure. Maybe this building is twice as wide as this building. Okay, so I can use that as a measurement device. If you had another set of windows, up at the top, you can then further divide this space by finding the center of this diagonal or this area right here. So that would be an application to a building. Let's do a fence on a road. Now here's a road that I drew. Rather than just 2 lines, I kind of made it look a little more realistic. But you can notice too, with perspective, there's a little more detail in the foreground. Okay, you can see some of the rocky, it's a gravel road, but as it goes off in the distance, it becomes just little dots. You don't see all that detail. But up close, there's individual rocks. Way up here, you may see rocks that are with that much detail. But that's part of perspective also. Let's say we're going to put a fence in here. Horizon, eye level, here's the vanishing point. Sketching the top of the fence and the bottom of the fence. Now, if this fence is lower than me, here's my eye level over here, and here's a person standing here. They're taller than the fence. Got it? So this person's looking down the fence. Okay, so I'm going to establish just a starting point right here. Here's the first post in the fence. What I'm going to draw is the posts, and then you could fill in whatever design would be on that fence. Again, establish that first one. This is the hardest part, but if this is a 6-foot person, I'm thinking 6 feet would be, you can't take that because 6 feet wouldn't be way out here, in perspective, but maybe about here would be a 6-foot area. So if I'm going every 8 feet for a fence, does that look believable? Yeah, that looks like that could be about 8 feet because that 8 feet is going to be foreshortened. Okay, so once you establish that first post, the 2 diagonals, and then from that midpoint where the diagonals intersect, back to the vanishing point, just a light center line. Okay. Now I'm going from this point again through this point where the midpoint line intersects the second fence post. So that would be right there. Now I just keep going through the center point from the previous fence post. And I hit right there. There's the next fence post, and on and on. That looks believable. You know, then, so that's just a framework. If you're doing a painting or a sketch or whatever, that just gives you an idea where the location is. The more you do sketching and in perspective, after a while, you'll be able to just kind of eyeball knowing that these get closer together. But this is a good starting point. You know, from there, I can basically kind of tell how much it's decreasing in size and just kind of work that back. Okay, so that would be a fence post or fence posts. You know, then I would add some. Now, if the fence post is this wide up here, here's a like a log kind of a fence post. They get narrower, just like anything else. The distance gets smaller, and they get smaller and smaller as they go back in the distance. Okay, okay, that would be a fence post. One more, then I think I'll see if I can end this video and then start a second one. Trees, same principle. I've got my first tree, and I want to do, say, a row of trees that are equally spaced. Okay, just take the top of that tree. Again, I'm using an eye level, which is if I'm standing by the tree. Okay, so I'm not going to draw the whole tree each time, but let's say the trees are spread out, oh, say about this far. Here's the bottom of a tree, and I'll just put in a triangle to represent the tree. But what I'm concerned with is that top point. So here's the bottom point of that tree. So I do my two diagonals. There's the center point between the two projected lines at top and the bottom. Okay, go from this first tree through, let's put a line in here, through this line on the second tree, and where it intersects the projected line from the top of the tree, that would be the location of the next tree. So let me sketch these in a little more so that you can see that they're trees. The bottom of here, here's the point in the middle of that tree. Same principle. And as the trees go off in the distance, there's going to be less detail. Here's the next point. And at this point, I can probably kind of just eyeball, and they're going to just fade out into nothing. Okay. It can apply to anything. Okay, I'm going to stop right here. I've got a couple more samples to show of working with interiors and also something on the ground. So that's this video. I'll do another one on diagonals here in a second.